invitation arrived on an otherwise uneventful Thursday evening. Emma had been scrolling through her phone, ignoring the stack of bills on her kitchen counter, when the sleek black envelope caught her eye. It had no postage, no return address, just her name etched in elaborate gold script. The weight of it felt oddly heavy in her hands, as though the paper concealed more than just words. Curiosity overruled caution as she slid a finger beneath the seal, revealing a thick, cream-colored card inside. The message was concise. You are cordially invited to the Crimson Masquerade. Date, Saturday, January 6th. Location, 13 Blackthorn Manor. Dress code, formal attire, mask required. There was no RSVP, no further details, just a final line that sent a shiver down her spine. You have been chosen. Emma laughed nervously, half expecting someone to leap out from behind her couch, yelling, "Gotcha!" But she was alone. The longer she stared at the card, the more its elegant lettering seemed to demand her attention. She told herself it was some sort of elaborate prank, perhaps her friend Claire's attempt to drag her out of the rut she'd been in since the breakup. Still, she found herself Googling 13 Blackthorn Manor. The results were sparse, limited to a handful of vague references about a long-abandoned estate on the outskirts of town. The mystery gnawed at her over the next 2 days. She found herself thinking about the invitation at odd moments, while brushing her teeth, waiting for her coffee to brew, even in the middle of a meeting at work. By Saturday evening, she could no longer resist. She stood in front of her mirror, a sleek black dress hugging her figure. She wasn't entirely sure why she'd decided to go. Morbid curiosity, boredom, or perhaps a whispering compulsion she couldn't quite place. Her mask, a simple black lace affair, sat beside her on the vanity. Just as she reached for it, the doorbell rang. On her doorstep was a small box tied with crimson ribbon. Inside lay a mask unlike anything she'd ever seen. It shimmered with an unearthly luster, deep red with intricate gold filigree that seemed to shift when she moved it. There was no note, but she knew instinctively it was meant for her. The mask felt cool and almost alive in her hands. Her reflection in the mirror seemed somehow sharper as she slipped it over her face. For a moment, she felt a strange pressure, like the mask was molding itself to her. But it passed quickly. Blackthorn Manor loomed like a shadow against the night sky, its Gothic spires reaching for the stars. Emma's stomach twisted as she stepped through the massive oak doors, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The air inside was heavy with the scent of roses and candle wax. Figures in elaborate masks and opulent attire swirled around her, their laughter and murmurs mingling with the haunting strains of a string quartet. The grandeur of the scene was intoxicating, but there was an undercurrent of something darker, something she couldn't quite name. "Welcome," a voice purred behind her. Emma turned to find a man clad in a midnight blue suit, his mask a menacing blend of black and silver. His eyes, cold and piercing, locked onto hers. "You wear it well," he said, nodding toward her mask. Before she could respond, he melted into the crowd. Unease prickled at her skin, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. The mask seemed to hum against her face, a faint vibration she dismissed as nerves. Yet as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. People whispered her name without knowing her. A woman in emerald green fainted upon seeing her, muttering something about the chosen one. And then there were the mirrors. Every reflective surface in the manor seemed to betray her. When she passed by, her reflection lingered a moment too long, its eyes following her with unsettling intent. Once, she could have sworn her mirrored self smiled when she did not. She avoided looking directly into them, but the unsettling feeling persisted, like an itch she couldn't scratch. "Emma," a voice whispered, soft as a lover's caress. She spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. The mask's hum grew louder, a low thrum that resonated in her skull. She stumbled into an empty corridor, desperate to escape the crowd. It was there, in the dim light of a flickering candelabra, that she saw it. A figure stood at the end of the hall, draped in crimson robes. Its face was obscured by a mask identical to hers, but its eyes, those hollow, burning eyes, pierced straight into her soul. "Help me," it rasped. Its voice was faint, almost drowned out by the roaring in her ears. She took a step back, her heart hammering against her ribs, but the figure remained rooted in place, its hollow eyes pleading. Emma ran, the world blurring around her. She found herself in a grand ballroom, its ceiling adorned with a fresco of angels descending into darkness. The masked revelers were gone. Only the crimson-clad figure remained, standing beneath a massive chandelier. "What do you want from me?" Emma demanded, her voice trembling. The figure tilted its head. "Freedom." The chandelier's crystals cast fractured light across the room, illuminating a tapestry on the far wall. It depicted a woman, her face obscured by the same crimson mask, standing before a mob wielding torches and pitchforks. Beneath it, a Latin inscription read, "Maledicta persona, the cursed one." The figure stepped closer, and Emma's breath caught. It wasn't just wearing the mask. Its face was the mask, the filigree etched into its very being. The hum in her skull became a roar as it spoke. "The mask chooses its wearer, binding their soul to mine. Only when you take my place can I be free." "Take your place?" Emma whispered. Her hands clawed at the mask, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as the figure reached for her, its touch icy and invasive. Memories not her own flooded her mind. A woman burned as a witch, her screams echoing through centuries. The faces of previous wearers, each one consumed by madness before succumbing to the curse. "You cannot escape," the figure said, its voice now a chorus of the damned. The memories grew more vivid, each one a kaleidoscope of agony and despair. Emma fell to her knees, clutching her head as the visions overwhelmed her. But Emma wasn't ready to give in. Through sheer force of will, she fought the presence invading her mind, clawing her way back to her own thoughts. The chandelier above began to tremble, its crystals vibrating in harmony with the mask's hum. Shadows danced wildly on the walls as the flames of the candelabras seemed to surge and flicker in response to her inner turmoil. An idea struck her, reckless and desperate, but her only chance. She stumbled to one of the candelabras, her legs trembling beneath her. Grasping its heavy iron frame, she tilted it toward the tapestry. The flames caught quickly, licking hungrily at the ancient fabric. The figure screamed, a sound that resonated deep in her chest, like 1,000 voices crying out in unison. Its form wavered, becoming translucent and smoke-like, as though tethered to the burning tapestry. The mask's grip on her face began to loosen, but it wasn't enough. With a surge of determination, Emma grabbed the mask with both hands, ignoring the searing pain as it fought against her. It felt alive, writhing in her grasp like a living creature. She hurled it into the growing flames, watching as it twisted and contorted, the gold filigree glowing white-hot before disintegrating into ash. The figure let out one final deafening wail before collapsing into a pile of soot. The chandelier above shattered, raining glass shards onto the floor, and the ballroom was plunged into an eerie silence. Emma collapsed, her body shaking with exhaustion as the fire continued to consume the room. The acrid scent of burning fabric and wood filled her lungs, but she could feel the oppressive weight of the mask finally lifting. The flames, now uncontrollable, spread across the ballroom. Emma's breathing was shallow as she struggled to her feet. Her gaze darted to the grand doors, her only escape. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, Emma sprinted toward the grand doors, her lungs burning from the thickening smoke. The floor beneath her was hot, embers licking at the edges of her gown. She stumbled, catching herself on a toppled chair, but the searing heat spurred her onward. The ornate double doors loomed ahead, a faint glimmer of moonlight seeping through the cracks. She grasped the heavy brass handles and pulled with all her might. The doors groaned but held fast. Panic clawed at her as the fire crept closer, its heat blistering her skin. She pounded on the doors, screaming for help, but the house seemed to swallow her cries. The chandelier's shattered remains crackled underfoot, and the walls began to buckle, the flames consuming them hungrily. Through the haze, she spotted a side passage leading to a smaller door. Without thinking, she dashed toward it, her heart hammering in her chest. This door gave way easily, spilling her into a narrow stone corridor. The air was cooler here, the fires reached slower. She raced down the passage, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. The corridor ended in a spiral staircase. Emma didn't hesitate, descending into the unknown. Each step was a leap of faith, the darkness below swallowing her whole. The heat receded as she went deeper, replaced by an eerie chill. The flames above seemed to falter, as if repelled by whatever lay beneath Blackthorn Manor. At the bottom of the stairs, she emerged into a cavernous chamber lit by the flickering glow of torches. The walls were carved with strange symbols, their meanings lost to time. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, its surface etched with the same intricate patterns as the mask she had destroyed. A wave of nausea washed over her as she approached it, her body trembling with exhaustion. The pedestal's surface pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat. A whispering filled the chamber, incomprehensible, yet insistent. Emma clutched her head, willing the voices to stop, but they grew louder. The air thickened, pressing down on her like a weight. She realized with growing dread that the mask's destruction had not ended the curse. It had merely transferred its essence to this place. "No," she whispered, backing away. "I won't let you take me." The whispers rose to a crescendo, and the symbols on the walls began to glow. Shadows coalesced in the corners of the chamber, forming twisted, spectral shapes. They advanced toward her, their hollow eyes filled with malice. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she searched for an escape. Her gaze fell on a torch mounted to the wall. Without hesitation, she seized it, the flames dancing wildly in her grasp. She swung it at the nearest shadow, its form dissipating with a shriek as the fire made contact. Empowered, she lashed out at the others, forcing them to retreat. The pedestal's pulsing grew erratic, its glow intensifying. Emma realized what she had to do. Raising the torch high, she brought it down onto the stone surface with all her might. The fire consumed the pedestal instantly, its intricate patterns cracking and blackening. The chamber shook violently, the walls beginning to crumble. The shadows howled in unison before dissolving into nothingness. Emma fled up the staircase as the cavern collapsed behind her. She burst into the open air, the cool night breeze a stark contrast to the inferno she had escaped. Blackthorn Manor was a blazing ruin, its spires crumbling into ash. She fell to her knees on the grass, sobbing with relief as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon.
Weeks passed, but the events of that night haunted Emma's every waking moment. The newspapers reported the fire at Blackthorn Manor as an accident, attributing it to faulty wiring in the abandoned estate. No mention was made of the masquerade, the mask, or the horrors she had faced. Emma's life had been irrevocably changed. She moved to a new city, hoping to leave the memories behind, but the shadows lingered. At night, she dreamed of the mask, its crimson filigree reassembling itself piece by piece. The whispers returned, faint but insistent, growing louder with each passing day. She kept the lights on as she slept, but even that offered little comfort. The reflections in her mirrors still seemed to move of their own accord. One evening, she received a package. It was small, wrapped in black paper, with no return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it, dreading what she might find. Inside was a single card, its cream-colored surface blank except for a single line of text in gold script. "You have been chosen." Emma dropped the card as though it had burned her, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in her haste to get away. But even as panic gripped her, she knew there was no escape. The curse was not bound to the mask or the manor, it was bound to her. The shadows in her apartment lengthened, stretching toward her as the lights flickered and died. A cold wind swept through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of roses and candle wax. Emma closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as the whispers enveloped her once more. Somewhere in the darkness, a figure watched, its crimson mask gleaming in the faint light of the moon. The curse had found its new vessel.